Hey everyone, it's Dick here, as per a viewer request to compare riding a full-size bike to a small displacement motorcycle after acquiring their full bike license. Today I'll be riding my Royal Enfield Classic 500 and discussing how a midweight motorcycle differs from a smaller bike. Now I'm out on a midweight bike. This is my Royal Enfield Classic 500. It's a 500cc single-cylinder engine. So the Royal Enfield is actually probably a good comparison for a midweight to what I was saying about the budget qualities of most 125s. Because this is an Indian-made motorcycle, and the materials and the build quality are kind of on the low end for midweight bikes. And so it's not going to compare one-to-one with, a Japanese-made bike or even a European-made bike. It's probably going to be a little better quality, if not on parity with a Chinese-made motorcycle. I tend to see the Indian-made bikes a bit better quality than most of the Chinese bikes, but the Chinese are catching up to the Indians, I'd say. And so it's probably a good comparison if you're looking at budget 125s and then looking to get a midweight bike. You can see a drastic difference in quality when you look at a Honda or a Yamaha midweight to even their own 125s. Immediately, when you're on a midweight bike, you have more power and you have an ability to accelerate. So when I was coming on that slip road on the 125, I was in top gear and I was really straining that engine to get up to speed. And the engine remained strained while I was traveling on the dual carriageway. But I'm in third gear here. I just dropped into fourth, and I have another gear on this bike. And on many midweights these days, you have two more gears. You have 6 gears. So really, you have a lot more acceleration and power available to you to get up to speed, to stay at speed, to accelerate around an issue if it crops up. And you feel more stable on a midweight bike. It's heavier. You feel like there's more road presence, and you feel like there's more strength and stoutness. So yeah, I'm able to travel at speed. I can accelerate past people I need to pass. A midweight is the logical next step from a learner bike. I would recommend against going right to a full-size, high-capacity motorcycle coming from a learner bike, because although it has that acceleration we were talking about, it's a bit too much power. You have to work hard to rein in that power. Getting up to speed off the line, staying with traffic, midweights have that versatility. Engine braking is also a lot more comfortable and usable than on a 125. A 125, when you engine brake on a 125, you kind of rattle. You kind of rattle to a stop, and you feel like you're really straining the engine a bit. But with a midweight, with some torque to it, engine braking is a very useful skill. Filtering, again, on those 125s, they put those optical illusion, eye-tricking wide handlebars, and you're kind of struggling to filter confidently. But on a midweight bike, they're putting the handlebar width at a reasonable width, which is just about shoulder width. So if you could walk through the space in traffic, you can ride through the space in traffic. And that's also more confidence inspiring. So you have the power to accelerate, you have the robustness of the engine to engine brake, you have reasonable width for filtering. So there's a lot of positives to the midweights. The thing that you'll notice immediately from the beginning when you get on a midweight is the torque at the beginning of your acceleration, where on a 125 you generally have to really twist that throttle and rev it to the high end. If you do that on most mid-range bike, you're going to be kind of giving yourself a bit of whiplash. You're going to be snapping your neck back a little bit. So you have to be aware that although you're not working the gears as much, you're not working the engine as much, you are controlling that throttle. You do have to manage that throttle. You have to control that acceleration on that throttle, on that twist grip. There will be people who say, well, my 125 is better in the city and I don't have to worry about managing that power, and I could just put narrower handlebars on my bike and I've solved that issue that you're talking about. And that's true. That's exactly right. You'll find on a smaller bike, the narrower handlebars you have, the twitchier the turning radius is, the twitchier the steering will feel. So that wider handlebar actually gives you a bit more stability as well on a smaller framed bike. So you can address the narrowness, but you might come up with another issue in terms of how squirrely the bike feels. The other thing about moving up to a midweight bike from a learner-sized bike is that you have a bit more choice in terms of not necessarily styles of bike, well, definitely styles of bike, but that's less important than configurations, kind of riding positions, seat heights. You know, most 125s tend all to feel the same, except for like a Grom or a Monkey, where your midweights, you're going to have cruiser style bikes with lower seat heights, you're going to have kind of scrambler styles, you're going to have dirt bikes. There's a lot of different seat height availabilities and different style configurations that give you a bit more choice in terms of fit and function. Now, my experience with 125s is actually the opposite of most people's experience with 125s, in that my first motorcycle was a 650 V-twin. So I kind of forced myself to learn in the kind of trial by fire method, where I just got on a big, what wasn't considered big in the States, but a mid-weight or big displacement motorcycle, and just figured it out. There was a little bit of the Screamin' Mimi situation where I just slowly creeped on the accelerator and then pulled in the clutch. Slowly creeped on the accelerator and then pulled in the clutch, and it was this funny, I had my license, I was fully insured, the bike was registered, but I was out on the road like I was, sneaking a sip of Dad's whiskey or something. It was kind of a funny experience. Well, I went from a 650 twin to a 400 to a 250 to a 125. I had a bit different experience than most people coming to motorcycling. And in some cases I preferred the 125, in some cases I preferred the mid-weights, and then never really kind of fallen in love with big displacement bikes. I always feel like they're a bit too much for what I need. Even touring or long highway miles, I never really felt like I needed a 1,000 to 1,600 to 1,800 cc bike. And when you get into a bike that big, like I said with the 125, the bigger the engine, the more builders justify tacking shit on, and the more stuff they tack on, the heavier your bike is going to be, and then you have to then maneuver that bike around. And I'm not too concerned about maneuvering the bike while I'm riding. I'm concerned about maneuvering the bike when I'm pushing it around the drive or when I'm parking it. That's where my concern lies. My concern is pushing it around when the engine's off, because I have bikes that I know there's a limited life to how long I'm going to be able to own them and how long I'm going to be strong enough to push them around. The question really is, what should I expect moving from a small displacement 125 up to a quote-unquote full-size bike? There's a whole range of bikes that falls within that category of what a full-size bike is. But really, it comes down to the weight of the bike and that torque, that initial acceleration off the line. Being aware of the weight and being aware of that power that you have on hand is key. And once you're aware of that and you learn how to use it, a mid-range or full-size bike is going to be a lot more versatile and potentially safer than your 125. My recommendation would be to look at some of the 400s that are available, even some of the used 400s. There's a lot of 400s back in the 70s and 80s that are fantastic little bikes, great weight, and more importantly, great power. They're not underpowered 400s. But a 400 is a good transition into a full-size bike. I know there's a Kawasaki Ninja now 400. Even the CB 500s. Those have manageable power, they're lightweight, they're great, I'd say little bikes, great little bikes. That would be a good way of transitioning up to a full-size bike. Really, they call them A2 licenses because there's limited horsepower, but an A2 bike is a full-size bike, and there's a lot of people who ride A2 bikes and never buy bigger bikes. I won't say grow out of them, never grow out of them. That's not the case, because there's no real reason to grow out of. You're not growing out of it. You're just choosing to have a bike with more power or a bit more bling. But, the bigger the engine, most of the time it's your marquee bikes, and so the bigger the engine, the more expensive the bike's going to be. Another consideration when you're going from a 125 with your full-size license up to a full-size bike is insurance costs, the running costs of the thing. And, if you can afford to buy the bike, can you afford to maintain the bike? Can you afford to insure the bike? I know in the states that I lived, anything over a 600cc bike was in a higher insurance bracket, and I was paying more on insurance. So one of the decisions for me to stick with mid-weight bikes came from a financial position, so that I wasn't insurance poor. I could buy a really nice 600 and not be paying frivolous amounts of money because they thought I was going to be foolish on a 1,000cc bike.
Click on the link to go to the final video in the series where I discuss riding a full-size motorcycle, my BMW F700 GS. If you like that video and you want to see more like them, hit like, share, and subscribe.